We are recording. All right, welcome to class number 3 of our Getting Real Group Facilitation webinar. And today what I want to cover is the handout that I sent about control patterns that you see in groups. I'm going to do a little bit with that. And then I want to go over exercises, some of my favorite group exercises for various types of groups, general public groups, corporate groups, that sort of thing. I mean, I guess there's different kind of groups because Orv talked to us last week about volunteer groups, and that's a unique type of group. But I'd treat that more like kind of a cross between a general public group and a corporate group, because they don't. When a group has to work together, like a corporate group, the issue of safety and the issue of group norms and corporate culture is huge. So you treat a corporate group much different than you treat a general public group of people who are never going to see each other again. And then there might be like a couples group where you're there with your couple, but we won't be going into those kind of groups. But of course, that needs to be treated a little differently too. But you can be riskier in couples groups and general public groups right off the bat. So the stages can be kind of collapsed a little bit. But with a corporate group, you want to really warm people up well and help them feel safe and like each other. Like I'll be talking about this when I talk about team building. You know, the first part of the team building is something a little lighthearted where people, they emphasize their positive things before they get into their conflicts. So that's the general. I think we're all kind of integrating as we go through life, and I'm emphasizing it in this class, how developmental thinking can help you out in designing interventions that are useful for groups, knowing that, like I wrote in one of the handouts, say, an infant has less capacity for stress than an adult does. And so we have to kind of manage the amount of stress. And when I say stress, I mean anything that's uncomfortable. We have to manage the amount of stress and gradually make sure the group is getting more and more stress, or it won't grow and develop. If you're just a big mommy the whole time and you do everything for the group, then the group won't develop its own self-management capabilities. On the other hand, there are some types of groups that you just want to shepherd very carefully the whole time, like if it's an intense conflict situation. So, we'll get into that when I get into the stages of group development, which I'm going to do second. I think the first thing I want to do is I'm going to bring up the handout on control patterns frequently seen in groups, and I'd like to have you guys share a little bit about yourselves. So here is the handout. I think this is it. Is it? Yeah, here it is. So right here on the first page, I give a little introduction to what control patterns are. And they're basically your automatic personality habits that you use to feel safe, whether in groups or anywhere else. And the idea here, and even though you're not a therapist, a lot of times you're not acting in any role of therapist, I always like, when I'm working with any group, to have personal development be on the agenda, and I sell that pretty hard, that if you're not growing and developing yourself, whatever you're doing isn't going to be very alive for you. And I might give some examples from my own life. So that's just a thing that you might want to make sure you also sell, because I think every one of you has that value. But we consciously put that somewhere in the context up front. So with that, I want to bring in your own personal experiences when you're first in a group, any of your patterns that you've noticed. And the few that I've written here in the handout there's a bold face type that says when entering a new group. So would you just take a minute and look at how many of these things you have done? Maybe you don't do it anymore, but you know where that ego need comes from. So I want us to develop empathy for our group members by putting ourselves in their shoes now. So just take a look, and then I'm going to ask anybody who's willing to go ahead and share on this. And we'll come back to seeing people's face here when we do our sharing. First, I just want to let you see this handout. What helps me in these classes is to have a printout as well as looking at the screen share.
Dr. Susan, this is Orv. I don't have the screen on me today, so I would be on the phone.
Okay, well, do you have the handout? Because I sent the handout out and I mentioned that I was going to use it in class. So if you know you're going to, just for reference, if you know you're going to be on the phone or not, not able to view something, I would appreciate it if you would print out the handout. I guess it's too late for
the handout.
Do you have it there?
Yes.
Okay, excellent. So that's what I'm doing. I'm actually looking at my piece of paper handout here, and I'm going to make a little note next to the ones that I myself do or have done, because I still do some of this shit. That's quite a lot.
I'll be ready. I'll be ready. The time is right.
Yeah, I think that's where that list came from my own personal experience, and I will want you, once you look at my list, add your own, because we can learn from each other. A lot of you have had many group experiences. And when I ask you to share, I think I just ask you, just share one of these patterns that you noticed, because each of us could probably name 5 of them that we use. So name one. My assignment for our sharing today would be name one of these patterns or add a different one. And what was the fear that was motivating? This is a sub-question now. After you've named it, what was the fear that might have been motivating you doing this, or the need, or I'll even call it the pseudo need, like the ego need, but it's not like your deepest need. So give you a minute now. I'll be quiet.
Well, this is Kate. I can share.
Why don't you go ahead and share? Oh, I can see you when you're sharing, so that's good. I'll leave the screen handout up. Go ahead, Kate. Go ahead and share. Get us started.
Well, I do most of these, but the one that is most recent and fresh is comparing myself to others and then also judging them. And what's the fear or need? I think, it definitely comes out of safety. And what is the fear? I think it's just the fear of just not being good enough.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah. And there's something in there about annihilation. It's totally not logical, but it even goes that far. I remember at the Getting Real workshop, for example, I just like, oh my God, I just was panicking. And sometimes stuff just gets stirred up.
Yeah, well, here, let me comment on that, because annihilation suggests the need for safety, which is obviously, one of the most common needs that shows up in an early stage of the group. And in order to feel safe, a lot of us try to assess who's dangerous here, who could hurt me. Now, I don't know,
Oh,
that's not necessarily a conscious need, but when people look deep, a lot of times that's like, who could hurt me? Who's safe? You know, who can I align with? Who do I have to keep my distance from? Stuff like that. So to me,
yeah,
that's one of those early stage subconscious themes that's going on.
yeah.
Okay, anybody else want to jump in?
Dr. Susan, I'd like to jump in.
I can.
Go ahead, let Orv, and
With
then
Orv.
go ahead, and we'll let them, then after that, somebody else. Go ahead, Orv.
The control pattern that I like to share that comes up for me many times is wanting to speak and share my input or opinion, and yeah, I feel some restlessness if I don't do that, and my need is, or my fear is that I will not understand or follow what the group is discussing, and yeah, fall behind.
Uh-huh. You want to make sure you get your voice heard right up front, partly to not like fall behind. And there's something in this that's valid. It's like, if people have had their voice heard in a group, and you know, that's why I always recommend you work out a way, if you know, if it's a training group where they're just the audience and you're the deliverer of information, that doesn't count for what I'm about to say. Although anytime you've got a group, it's better to let everybody's figure out a way to get everybody's voice heard as soon as possible in the group, because then they can kind of relax and not not feel like, geez, I'm not even in yet, and everybody else is kind of getting ahead of me, kind of like what Orv suggested there. The group's going on without me. And I wanted to piggyback on Orv's as the one that was one of my biggest patterns, when it would be like an unstructured group and the leader wouldn't invite you all in, you know, it was just kind of sink or swim type groups. I would jump right in right away, or be the first to volunteer for an exercise or something, because I was just so anxious that I thought, well, and what it seemed to do for me is, once I've jumped in and done it, even if I make a fool of myself, I'm not as anxious. I'm not like waiting, oh, should I or shouldn't I? That's my way of managing my own anxiety about when to speak.
Susan, you mentioned that that is definitely one that you, in the beginning of a group, you want to make sure everybody's voice is heard, and that's a really important piece, which my curiosity goes to, wow, I wonder if there's like 3 or 4 really big pieces that you see are really important at the beginning of any group, you find really important to help settle things. If that's one of them, I'm curious if there are 2 or 3 others that.
The other one is setting the context. In other words, why are we here? And I, the leader, what do I expect of members? You know, it's part of setting the context. I did mention that before, but I'm glad you're asking the question this way, so I, you know, get it out in a more organized way. So get everybody's voice heard, set the context where they know what's going to be expected of them. Another thing is, say something about your own role. That's also part of the context. Like if I'm leading an honesty salon, I will say, I'm going to be wearing 2 hats here. I'm going to be the facilitator who kind of jumps in and helps you speak according to the communication agreements that we've set here. And I'm also going to be a member, and I'm going to be doing my best to just speak according to these communication agreements, like making I feel statements and not intellectualizing, you know, agreements like that. So, and then I guess one other thing that helps people settle down, if it's a content-based group, is let them know if there's going to be Q&A, you know, when they can interrupt. because people don't know, should I raise my hand? Should I interrupt the speaker? That sort of thing. So let them know, I'm going to talk for 5 minutes, or I'm going to talk for X, and I'm going to cover these 3 points, and then we're going to have Q&A, or I welcome you to just interrupt me anytime if you have questions.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Those things help people settle down.
Thank you.
Good question. Thanks, Carol. Anybody else want to share about yourself or bring up a question like Carol did?
Yep, I'll share. This is Darcy. Hi.
Hey, Darcy.
Hi, I'm calling in because I have shitty reception at my little Rose Hotel in Venice Beach. Hi, everybody. So one of the things that I notice that I do is when entering a new group is I hang back until I know the rules, until I see what others do. I also do not like to interrupt. Like I don't, I'm just have this thing where it takes a lot for me to interrupt somebody. So, yeah, and I think my fear where I'm coming from underneath all that is I want to know what I'm stepping into, and I want to sound like I know what I'm talking about. Yeah,
not make mistakes, that type of thing.
exactly.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And then the avoid interrupting thing, what popped in my mind, Darcy, was I introduced to the class before we came on the call today that you're going to lead an honesty salon. We think maybe next time. And being a leader of an honesty salon, you're actually forced to learn to get comfortable interrupting people. That's part of your role, and you would have to say that up front. And this helps you get over that fear. If you just, like in answer to Carol's question, you know what my role is to actually interrupt you, and I'll try to do it as politely as possible. Like, may I offer some coaching here, or could we pause this right now, Mary? If Mary's going on and on with something that's not relevant to the present moment, So that is a big learning experience for a lot of us too, because my fear is that I want people to like me, and I want people to feel safe in the group. And frankly, when I have, as an honesty salon facilitator, and this could generalize to other types of groups, when I have interrupted people or paused them to offer something that I meant to be a helpful learning piece, sometimes people get triggered and they have a really bad experience. They clam up. I've heard this, I've had the feedback from, they've clammed up for the rest of the whole evening because I interrupted them maybe too early. This is my judgment in hindsight. They weren't ready to be facilitated at all yet. They were just getting in the room, and I have interrupted them in a way that they just weren't ready to handle it. It was a big button pusher. And you can't prevent that. You do your best. You can't prevent it. You do your, if possible, at the end of the group, you have a way, if it's one of these process groups that's pretty unstructured, like an honesty salon, you have a way at the end for people to bring up unfinished business, clear the air with each other, and that sort of thing. And that's what any growth-oriented group that's purely people's personal issues type of thing, you would always end, like a weekend that I'll do, end the last hour or something has to do with anything that's incomplete that they felt but they didn't get the chance to say. And also then how do you bring some of these things back home applications? That's always
Susan, would you not do that with a corporate?
Yes, exactly. You would definitely do that with a corporate group. Yes.
You would as well. Okay.
Yep. Especially with a corporate group, the back home applications piece.
But what about the unfinished business? Unfinished kind of a processing?
You would have a structure for that. I have a simple structure that I use at the end of both the Getting Real card game and the Truth at Work card game. It's the same practice. This is sort of getting ahead of ourselves into the other handout, but it's basically 3 questions. I liked it when, fill in the blank. I didn't like it when, fill in the blank. And then right now I feel. So it's a very structured way to just have people like hear where people are at the end. So it doesn't mean, and then if somebody's, if you kind of can get the vibe that somebody's leaving with a lot of unfinished business, you might have to address that after the group in a corporate group. It really, there's so many different types of corporate groups, and you may facilitate a more unstructured closure piece where you say anybody who had something that came up for them where you felt or thought something, but you didn't get a chance to say it. And that's a good structure. You need to keep it fairly structured for a corporate group until they've really got some chops, which maybe never. Yeah, I do a lot of hand holding in corporate groups, but I'll be talking a little more about that in the team building session, which I want to do. Okay. Anybody else want to share on your own pattern, and then I'll move on after maybe one more share.
Can you hear me?
Yes. Hi, Geraldine.
Hi. I find in groups, I always try to establish myself as like some sort of expert, like I know a bit more than everyone else. And I think the fear behind that is feeling like I don't actually belong there, like I'm some sort of fraud or I'm inadequate, not good enough, that sort of thing. Yeah, that's it. It's pretty simple.
Great. Good one. And when you're now, just when you guys, all of you, but no, particularly like Geraldine, if you're facilitating a conversation in a corporate environment, let's say, or any environment about control patterns, because people seem to be really interested in this material, if you can connect it to the workplace somehow, because it obviously control patterns are automatic, and the whole idea of personal growth is to interrupt automatic behavior and check in with what's true at a deeper level. And so you yourself, Geraldine, could model that. Let's say you're introducing the concept of control patterns, and then you make that self-revelation right then and there to kind of legitimize that this can be done safely. Yeah, because I like how you did that. And I bet you in a corporate environment especially, a lot of people can identify with that.
Yeah.
They're ready to see that kind of thing. They might not be quite so ready to see their fear of annihilation. That's a little deep for most people at the beginning of a training.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm gonna move to the other handout. But any questions while I'm doing that? Okay, here we go with the other one. Oops. I always have trouble getting the screen to go to the next handout, even when I'm clicking on the one.
Susan, it's Darcy. I only received one handout in the email on October 16th. Was there another one that I missed?
No, this one is from 2 weeks ago. We're working on a same handout that I sent out for last week. See, this says class.
Okay.
Might not even be able to see it yet. Let me get it up there. Just a second here.
I'll pull it up. It's just that I'm on the telephone.
Oh, you can't see it. But anyway, it was something that I sent, and I kind of mentioned on class last time, but I don't think I maybe said in an email that we're going to work mostly. I said last week, we're probably not going to get to this handout, so I'm going to work with it mostly next week. So here we are working with this. So the basic idea right now, what I'm wanting to do is name some of my favorite group exercises, but almost like before I do that, I think a nice structure would be for you guys, you know, you might want to look, I'm not sure, first of all, I'm not sure if this handout was clear, so I guess I should make that. Everything that has an asterisk there on the left, right before it, that's an exercise. And the things that come after that are like the title of the exercise and then where in my books that exercise is described. And I put then, like the first one, I see/hear and I imagine. Well, that exercise is in Getting Real, chapter 2, and then I put GR after that, which is just the way I'm going to abbreviate the book Getting Real every time I mention it thereafter. So just any questions about how I've organized this?
So Susan, this is Kate. Do you mean that, for example, under stage 1, where there's something that's asterisk like assessment of strengths and growing edges, that this exercise is described there? This is where it's described?
It's not fully described in that one. Well, the quizzes, like, you know, in the beginning of each chapter on the quiz, the whole exact exercise isn't described. I mean, I don't describe how you would introduce the exercise to a group, but I basically give you the content of an exercise, and then it's up to you to set the context for the exercise. You know,
Okay.
You know, now we're gonna be looking at how well people ask for what they want and assert their boundaries. So I'm going to give you a 5-part quiz here. This quiz is from the chapter 2 of Getting Real. Raise your hand if this is true of you, type of thing. You know, you can structure the quizzes any way you want, but those quizzes are actually quite useful.
Thank you.
Quizzes are great for in the beginning of any group, for getting people to realize that they really need this stuff, that they're good on some things, but they're not so good on some of the other things. So it's a part of a motivational technique.
Could you even put a quiz, like a short quiz, up on a PowerPoint, like if there were only 5 or 6 or 7 questions?
Yeah.
So everyone can kind of, yeah.
That'd be great. Good
Okay.
idea. I'm not going to go through all of these, but why don't we kind of look at stage 1? And because some of you aren't teaching Getting Real workshops, you just want to be able to use some of these tools in whatever work you're doing. If you're teaching Getting Real workshops, then this is like I see and I imagine, that one's really good. Learning some kind of body awareness. The next one is like relaxation training, but really it's some kind of body awareness, and there's a lot of body awareness tools and self-calming tools in 5-minute relationship repair. There's about 5 of them. You could take your pick. For more corporate audiences, the assessment things that I mentioned next, assessing your strengths, like using the quizzes, assessing somebody's worldview or level of consciousness. Now, this is something that I want to make you aware of, because most of you have never seen the book Beyond the Power Struggle. But it's got some really good exercises that have to do with conflict, and so I'm going to mention some of those right now. But one of them is an assessment exercise where there's 3 different worldviews. There's security control worldview, which is basically like the red states, the people who have black and white thinking. On Ken Wilber's developmental model, it would be more red. But people who are usually in kind of either like the building trades or truckers or in the coal mining industry, or I mean, I'm just thinking of the companies that some of them that I've worked with, police, FBI, you know, they have a certain culture, and it's more what in this book I call the security control. And I try not to make anything wrong, you know, but then there's the learning discovery, is the next level of consciousness, which is people who are more comfortable with fluidity and change, and who are consciously very growth oriented. And then the third level is what I call unity and participation. And that's more the level of consciousness where you really can do both and thinking, where you can come from your heart, where you feel yourself as a part of a unified field of life. I mean, it's a higher level of spiritual awareness. And it's kind of an interesting model. I did it a long time ago. I don't use it much now, but there might be use for it for some of you someplace. So I just want to make you aware of that. And then there's also a very detailed which are you in security control or learning discovery, you know, that dichotomy without the unity participation thing. In the first number 1 under assessment of worldview or level of consciousness, it's the assessing your learning discovery potential from the book From Chaos to Confidence. That is a very detailed scenarios, like your boss sends you to such and such, and he tells you it's for your own good, but you're kind of suspicious. What do you do? You know, and what do you say? Things like that. It gives you scenarios, and then you have to pick a security control option or a learning discovery option. And there are more than 2 options because there's several of each. And it gives people a feeling for how open they are to change and fluidity, because I did a lot of work on corporate change and being more change resilient. And that's basically all that material is in the book From Chaos to Confidence. And it's got like 30 something exercises you can use in corporate audiences. And they've been tested. And some of them are a little personal growthy, too much for some populations, but some of them are very corporate and use the corporate language.
So, Susan, if we were to start off with one of them, Beyond Power Struggle or From Chaos to Confidence for corporate, which would you say to start with?
I'd go with From Chaos to Confidence. I think there's more meat in there. The most exciting, I'll tell you an exercise though that's really fun, that's in Beyond the Power Struggle and nowhere else, that illuminates conflict. And I still use it in some of my Getting Real workshops, is called the Polar Dimensions Inventory. And that's a stage 2 or 3. That's actually a stage 3. If you scroll, I'm scrolling right now to stage 3, Polar Dimensions Inventory. And it looks at, like, are you a scurrier or a dawdler? Are you the kind of person that just tries to cram a lot in, or are you sort of life is a journey, not a destination? Are you a task-oriented person or a more relationship-oriented person? And then I ask people, go to the, because go to the one end of the room if you're more, let's call looker and leaper. That's another one. If you're a looker, you're very cautious. And if you're a leaper, you're like a risk taker and you just jump in. And so if you're a looker, go over to that corner of the room. If you're a leaper, go over to the other opposite corner. And if you're somewhere in the middle, because people always want to avoid being one or the other, because, it is a both and world. I'll let you kind of line yourself up. If you're kind of in the middle, go ahead. And then I'll have people do various tasks in each of those subgroups and even in the middle group. And sometimes I'll force people into the groups. I'll say, just pick in this environment, or in this marriage, are you more a looker or a leaper? Maybe in a different one, or in this system that we're in right now. I'll pick one, and then what's the good news about being a looker, and what's the bad news? And you talk to a little subgroup, and sometimes it depends on the group. I'll say, and what stories or judgments do you have about those people over there at the other end? How are they a thorn in your side? And I'll flesh that out. And at a recent relationship workshop I did, I used a different polarity, and it was fun. The people who are the ones who are like the pursuers in a relationship and who want more contact, and the people who really, hey honey, if you're happy, I'm happy, don't bug me, if you're more in that. and I asked them, Kate was in this workshop, and I asked them, what's the vulnerability in that? I didn't magnify the conflict. I magnified empathy for the other side. What's the vulnerability? Like the people who say, don't bug me, they don't look very vulnerable. Orv was in this workshop too, I think. Thank you for coming to this class. It's nice to be in touch with people that were in that workshop. We had fun. So it's like, what does it feel like to, have somebody wanting from you and you're not really ready to give it yet, and they're talking about their vulnerability. So you can use these. I just think that polarities exercise, and you can make up other polarities that are relevant for your group. One of the best polarities that's not in the book for the corporate arena, and people love this one, is the get it done people versus the do it right people. Get it done.
Oh, that's good.
It's so good. I mean, it's really healing, because the get it done people are like the managers and the CEO, and they're, just, or the salespeople, they just do things quick and dirty, but the scientists and the quality control people, their personalities are more careful, and, you just keep, we're not ready. You salespeople are pushing products that we haven't even tested yet, and so it's like different departments attract different personality styles, and you different functions. I won't call them departments anymore, because that's not really what they're called, but different functions in an organization have different personality styles, and they really need to understand each other and work together. But it's just fun to have a label that gives you some distance from a conflict, because it helps you get above the level of the problem instead of just blaming the other person, what a pain in the ass they are. It's like, hey, we've got this difference, and that's the point of view I'm always stressing. That point of view is very well articulated in the 5-Minute Relationship Repair book. It's like, we have a problem. This is our difference, and we have to deal with it. We're not going to change each other. I'm not going to make you into a scurrier if you're a dawdler. Just isn't happening. So you can beat your head against that brick wall, but let's get above the level of the problem and see, this is a we here. It's a we system. And how do we learn enough about each other to be able to collaborate and do something that transcends our differences and cooperates? So there really is technology for doing this. I just hope more companies and systems will allow us to do this work.
Susan, I have a question. Do you ever ask people to switch sides, and just speak, even though that's not their preferred end of the polarity, but to actually speak as if it was, so they're actually just seeing what it feels like to be on the other end?
Yeah, like they could interview, we could put the two polarities and then put somebody from each side, interview each other, and then report to the group, this is what I learned from my partner, that it feels like being a get it done person, and
yeah.
So that would be one way, but there's a lot of ways. I was involved in a sexual harassment thing in the last 3 days, and what we had it was a man and a woman, and there was drinking involved. It was an after work party, and first they each told their story. That you're probably not going to get called in for too many sexual harassment things, but I do. There's this one company that I just do everything. Just call me when there's a problem. So each person, he and she, tells their accounting of what happened. And then they tell the accounting from the other person's point of view. And just even that little simple exercise really helped them. So I'm going kind of all over the map here, but just wanting to emphasize some of the goodies that are available in my books. And I'll tell you the books that have the most actual exercises that you can lift, because really, go ahead and like Brad Blanton used to say, you're stealing my stuff or something like that. But, I like to say, steal my stuff, book title, steal this book. And so the best things to steal from are Couples Journey, 5-Minute Relationship Repair, Getting Real, and From Chaos to Confidence. And whoever's got that voice in the background, mute yourself on the left side of the screen. Left side of the screen, you'll find your mute. Okay, thank you. So basically, in most of the groups that I do, what I've got here under stage 1 and stage 2, they could both be interchangeable. I mean, giving and receiving feedback is a skill that I'll teach right away in a group. And the way I'll teach it, I might teach let's say I'm doing a group that's going to become more of a conflict resolution or a process group, but in the beginning I need to teach them some skills. So giving and receiving feedback that is specific is an important skill. So I might have people first go around and say something about what do you hope, and this is a good rounds warm up. What do you hope will happen here today, and what do you hope won't happen? Something like that. What do you want here today, and what do you not want? And that usually works pretty good, except with a very high conflict team situation. But for most any kind of group, you can have that question. And so one person starts and goes around the circle or goes around the table, and they say their answer to that question, and then the second person doesn't take their turn until they have repeated something of what they heard, not the whole share, but something of, so what I heard you say is da 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 da, and when I heard you say that, this is what came up for me, either a feeling or a thought. Or I sometimes call it self-talk, the actual words. If you share a thought, then it's more of a little generalization type of thought or something, which I don't like. They're not as alive. But if you have a self-talk, which is share the actual words that played in your mind as you were listening or right after you finished listening to this person. So I thought to myself, or I said to myself, this is self-talk now. My self-talk was, wow, I never would have expected that from her. You see, the impact of self-talk is it's much more alive, and it's really owning your thoughts, but it's bringing thoughts to a place where you're observing your thoughts rather than being identified with your thoughts. Is that concept something that you guys get? Observing your thoughts. That's a very high value for me.
I get it.
Good. It's good to practice. All right, and to teach other people. So that's a good warm up to get a skill. You sort of teach a skill at the same time you're getting everybody in the room with rounds. The rounds word means everybody gets a turn to answer the same question. And so then the person who's just given the feedback tells what they want and don't want and goes around the room like that. And pretty much one of the hardest things in feedback that you got to lean on people for is being specific. Wherever you are, whatever your context, where you're leading a group, you're going to hear people throwing around labels and generalizations that are not helpful and can actually be harmful. And like somebody says, this is an example in one of my books, I'm too honest and it gets me into trouble, so they make a generalization about themselves like that. So your job as a coach, as the leader, is to say, Mary, can you tell me a time when you thought you were too honest and it got you into trouble? So you're drawing out a specific. And very often when they are asked for specifics, you see a lot more. They get to see a lot more of what's really going on. It's not about honesty at all. It's it reveals some fear that they have, some need they have to be in control. It'll reveal something more when you ask them to be specific. Plus, asking people to be specific gets them back into the actual experience of the feeling, and then they can learn more about what needs healing there, what needs completion there. So be a stickler for no generalizations, be specific. And I think just don't do the thing that an amateur group leader would do, which is you're not being specific, you're being general. That's very amateur. You don't want to do that. We're better than that. We can draw the person out. When you say that, when you say, when you say you're shy, even that, when you say you're shy, what images come to mind here? How do you experience your shyness? When have you been shy? What does that look like? Just helping them illuminate their labels and generalizations, both about themselves and about something that happened. It's a very deep skill, and I know I'm not doing it justice here. Any comments or questions or tricks that you guys have learned about helping people be specific?
Sometimes
I have one.
Okay, let's both go. Kate, and then Orv.
Sometimes what I'll do is actually frame it as what factually happened.
Good.
Like, what are the facts versus what are your interpretations or assumptions? And that does cause people to pause, because they do have to think of, well, what were the facts? And usually the first pass at that actually aren't facts. So they have to dig deep to get it.
Keep going with it, yeah. Uh-huh. Good. Orv?
Dr. Susan, I sometimes use, would you tell me what happened? Or if someone said for example, when you said, they use the example of I'm shy, I say, would you tell me what that feels like? Like, can you share something that happened where you felt shy?
Yeah.
So.
Good. That's great. And when people are in a feedback situation where they're giving feedback to somebody else, let's go to either a corporate or more of a general public kind of a situation where people may not have been exposed. Sometimes in personal growth settings, people have been exposed to this idea of the difference between the data or the facts and the interpretations, like what Kate was referring to. But if they seem like a fairly naive group, or if you're going to be getting into conflict, and I've got this under my stage 2 here, teach appreciations first as a training in being specific. which means when you did X, or when when you and I were in this meeting and I said this and then you said that, I felt appreciation. So if you teach them how to be specific, inviting them to give each other appreciations, it's easier to learn to be specific. And then that's kind of preparation for the next phase in your curriculum, which I've done quite a bit with companies. I know we're going to be getting into conflict, but I want, first of all, the appreciations help people feel safer and bonded, but I'm secretly teaching them how to be specific because they're really going to need it when we get to the difficult conversations, like when you let me down or disappointed me in that meeting. What are the specifics of what let you down and what disappointed you? Get that?
And Susan, I have a question. Can you be more specific? Specific question. Are we talking about appreciations like, I appreciate you for, and then fill in the blank with the specific thing that they said or did here?
Yeah. Or another way to do appreciations is when this specific thing happened, I felt appreciation. As long as you make sure that there's a blank that they fill in. It can be, I appreciate you for, the time when you said da 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 in the meeting or after the meeting. Or you can say, when you said da 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 in that meeting, I felt appreciation. Either structure. So you give them a structure. Yeah, you give them, when you're teaching feedback or when you're teaching appreciations, you have a written handout or a PowerPoint where the sentence stem is there, so that they just have to fill in the blank. Make it easy for them.
Can I have a question, Susan?
Yes.
What would be your rationale to people about the specifics, with the importance of being specific? How would you help me with that?
Excellent. Two
To
things.
people who just don't get it.
Yeah, good point. In the feedback context, where performance improvement is a goal, it's kind of easy because if you say you're not a team player, you're the manager, you're giving somebody, you're not a team player, they don't know what you're talking about. But if you say the last 3 team meetings, when you were asked to pitch in with Joe over there and do that, you refused to do that. First time you said you had to take your kid to the dentist, and the second time you said, well, the air quality was bad, so you couldn't go over there. It just that's the data that's making me say you're not a team player, which is then for a performance improvement situation, we're letting this person know what we expect and how to get along with me as your manager. And of course, then if you're giving feedback in a performance type situation, do you have any questions? Do you remember that? Do you remember it the way I remember it? I'd like to hear your point of view now. If you're giving negative feedback in that context, you need to not make it one way. But anyway, the specific is the person knows what's expected of them. In more of a personal growth and clearing the air context, and clearing the air is a useful skill in business too, you can't clear something if it's general. Like, you've been punishing me you've been punishing me for the last 5 months. Okay, so that's the general. What's the specific? Tell me what was going on when you felt punished, and the person gets into the actual experience of what was done and said and what they felt, and then they can actually clear that from their system. If you can't feel the impact of something, by bringing back the memory in detail, you're not going to be able to really clear it from your system. That's a basic principle of clearing the air. Does that make sense? It's a good question. I might have some better answers next time. But I think that question deserves attention, Sebastian.
If you got any more rationale, I'll be happy.
Yeah, rationale for specifics.
Mhm.
Probably do.
Thank you, Susan, very much.
Yeah. Anybody else got any better rationale or any additional rationale?
Well, Dr. Susan, I was wanting if Sebastian could be more specific in the situation he was wanting to use the rationale. That would really help me offer connect.
That's a good idea. I'll take that up when we do the team building. When we do the team building thing, which is going to be the next class that I'm in. Bring in who the client is and what your role is, and then what your context is, and I can give a better answer. That's excellent, Orv. Thank you. We're winding down here, so I'm not going to try to interview Sebastian today.
The only other thing I would add to that is that when people aren't, if there's two people talking and one person is not specific and they're saying, you're just a lousy team player, it creates a lot of defensiveness. So the more specific you can be, the less likely the other person's going to get triggered into defensive-ness.
Right, because you're talking.
That's a rationale.
Yes, because the whole idea of, I call it staying on your own side of the net, talking about yourself.
Yeah.
You're talking about yourself in a more vulnerable way, the impact it had on you, that sort of thing. You're making a stronger and safer bond with the other person rather than just cheaply, like a cheap shot, shooting out a label at them. It's very cheap. And being more specific takes a little more work, and it shows caring for the other person, caring for the relationship, as well as what Kate just said. Now just glance down. We may come back to this handout. What I'd like you to do is for the next class that I'm leading, look at any of these things that are headlines, such as down under stage 3. I told you what the polar dimensions inventory is, but maybe somebody doesn't really know what I mean by the anatomy of triggers. And if you have questions about any of these, or you want to hear a little more about when I would use them and what they are, make a note of that for the class that's going to be, I think it's November 2 or 3 that week. And also what I'd like you to do for that class is, and I'll put this in an email too for homework, think of situations in a group, group leadership, where you want to construct an exercise or a learning experience for a particular purpose, and what would be some good exercises, or what would be a design that would address that purpose or need. Okay. Jotting that down for myself. All right, any more comments or questions before I close today?
This is Darcy. I wanted to say just a couple sentences about what we're going to be doing next week.
Good, go ahead.
Okay. Hi all. I wasn't here last week, but I caught up via the recording. And so next week we're going to be practicing a modified version of an honesty salon, and so we'll be using some of our skills and being participating together as practice partners to hone our listening and listening to ourselves and each other. And yeah, that's what we'll do. And I got to figure out the Zoom thing. I'm sure I'll get it worked out.
Yeah, I'll help you with that. And before you got on the call, Darcy, I told people, even if they're not able to show up next week, I'm going to send to everybody the communication guidelines that I currently use in my honesty salons. Do you want me to do that, Darcy?
Yes, please.
So,
I mean, we're definitely just to make sure expectations are in the right place. We won't be getting to practice all of them, but it's to know and know where we're aiming towards, I think.
Yeah, you won't.
Does that sound right?
Yeah, that sounds good. Yeah, and keep expectations. That your expectation should be this will be fun. This will be a learning experience. This will be an experience. And an opportunity for Darcy to get some practice.
Yep.
Okay, so I'll write out a little email to everybody saying something. I'll put the homework in there and the honesty salon guidelines, and also I polled the group about how many people are going to show up, so we can poll the group again. I know it's going to be a pretty small group for you, Darcy, but it'll be an experiment. Okay, I'm going to sign off now. Talk to you guys in 2 weeks, and some of you will be on. Darcy will send you an invitation to Zoom next Thursday at this time. Okay, bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Bye, guys. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, bye-bye.
Bye.